Why do we work? Why do we make the sacrifices we make? The late nights, the syncing with coworkers 5 time zones away.
Why?
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 ¿Por qué hacemos lo que hacemos?
Why? Because we all want our work to mean something. We want it to have impact. And not just on the bottom line, but the people we ultimately serve. Your customers. Iron Mountain knows how to make your work mean more. After all, we've been protecting your most valuable assets for over 7 decades. Who better to help you use it to unlock new ideas and insights that will not only accelerate your business, but elevate it in so many ways. By digitizing your information, securely decommissioning your IT assets, safeguarding your brand reputation, collaborating to meet your sustainability goals, and connecting your work to the world.
So let's roll up our sleeves and get to it, shall we?
Let's find the gold in your mountain of data.
Let's elevate.
Let's elevate.
Let's elevate.
大家都是的嘛。
让我们提升。
Let's elevate.
Let's elevate.
Elevate the power of your work.
Από τα εργαστήρια των φαρμακείων δημιουργούνται βιοτεχνίες και μικρές παραγωγικές μονάδες. Όλες οι πρώιμες προσπάθειες για τη δημιουργία μιας έστω υποτυπώδους φαρμακευτικής βιομηχανίας είχαν ως πρωτεργάτες επιφανείς καθηγητές της χημείας και της φαρμακευτικής. Στις αρχές του 20ου αιώνα, ελονοσία και χολέρα ταλανίζουν τη χώρα. Η παραγωγή και η διάθεση κινίνης αποτελεί διεθνούς επίπεδου πετυχημένη πρωτοποριακή ρύθμιση, ενώ ο στρατός κατάφερε τη μαζική παραγωγή αντιχολερικού εμβολίου, το πρώτο βιολογικό φάρμακο κατά τη διάρκεια των Βαλκανικών πολέμων. Οι Έλληνες επιχειρηματίες τολμούν. Νέες βιομηχανίες δημιουργούνται συνεχώς. Πριν 90 χρόνια ξεκινά η δημιουργία του πρώτου σωματείου που καταλήγει στην Ένωση Ελλήνων Βιομηχάνων Φαρμακευτικών Ειδών, που διαθέτει, διαφημίζει φάρμακα και εξακολουθεί να αναπτύσσεται, έτσι ώστε κατά τον Δεύτερο Παγκόσμιο Πόλεμο επιτυγχάνεται πλήρης κάλυψη των αναγκών του στρατού και του Ελληνικού Ερυθρού Σταυρού σε θρησκεία, ενέσιμα και επιδεσμικό υλικό. Αρχές δεκαετίας του 50, με την ανασυγκρότηση του κράτους, μετονομαζόμαστε σε Ένωση Φαρμακευτικών Εργαστηρίων και θεμελιώνουμε τη νέα οικονομική φυσιογνωμία της Ελλάδας με την ανάπτυξη και τη δημιουργία της σύγχρονης φαρμακοβιομηχανίας. «1971» και καταλήγουμε στη σημερινή μας μορφή, την Πανελλήνια Ένωση Φαρμακοβιομηχανίας, της οποίας οι άνθρωποι ηγούνται της νέας προσπάθειας. Στοχεύουν ψηλά. Και με την ευρωπαϊκή ολοκλήρωση το 1992 πυροδοτείται η εξέλιξη. Η έρευνα και ανάπτυξη καινοτόμων φαρμάκων, η κατασκευή νέων μονάδων, ο εξυγχρονισμός γραμμών παραγωγής εντείνεται. Όπως και η αέναη προσφορά στον άνθρωπο, την κοινωνία, την επιστήμη, την οικονομία και την Ελλάδα. Όπως καταλήγει ο καθηγητής Εμμανουήλ στην ιστορία της φαρμακευτικής το 1948. Η σύγχρονος βιομηχανία των φαρμακευτικών ειδών ενίσχυσε σημαντικώς των εθνικών οικονομικών παράγοντα και επευλήθη εις των ιατρικών κόσμων, θέλει δε επιτελέσει αξιοθαύμαστους προόδους, διότι υπάρχουν τα πνευματικά και τα ηθικά κεφάλαια, αρκεί το κράτος να επιδείξει προς αυτήν στοργήν και αρρωγήν. Αυτή είναι η ιστορία μας. Αυτή είναι η Πανελλήνια Ένωση Φαρμακοβιομηχανίας.
A healthier future. That's what drives us. And as the world evolves, so do we. For over 125 years, we have taken on some of the most complex challenges in healthcare. Listening and responding to the ever-changing needs of people around the world. We focus on the long term, leading investment in research and development, striving to improve lives today and for generations to come. We're advancing science to ensure everyone has access to the healthcare they need. always innovating. We bring together dedicated people and diverse perspectives from across our global network, empowering each other to keep breaking new ground. But we can't do it alone. To succeed, we collaborate with each other, with our partners, with governments, with patience. Proud of what we do. We're here because we care. Our work creates a future where we all have more time with the people we love. That's what makes us who we are. That's what makes us Roche.
Είμαστε ιδιαίτερα περήφανοι σήμερα που εγκαινιάζουμε τη μονάδα παραγωγής μηχανημάτων ανταποδοτικής ανακύκλωσης στην Ελλάδα.
Συγχαρητήρια στην Envipco, συγχαρητήρια στην Texan για την πρωτοβουλία σας να δημιουργήσετε αυτήν την μονάδα εδώ πέρα στην πατρίδα μας.
I look forward to seeing more of these Envipco machines around the country.
Τώρα πλέον είμαι πιο ικανοποιημένος αφού δημιουργήθηκε στην Ελλάδα η πρώτη μονάδα παραγωγής μηχανημάτων ανακύκλωσης υψηλής τεχνολογίας.
Το συγκεκριμένο πρόγραμμα είναι πρωτοπόρο γιατί πέρα από το ποσό είναι 1 εκατομμύριο ευρώ στους τομείς της παιδείας, του περιβάλλοντος, της τοπικής κοινωνίας και της υγείας.
We are behind the transformation of DEPA into a modern, vertically integrated energy company, but also behind long-term contracts with suppliers, thus ensuring the country's energy security, and the renegotiation of contracts to secure even more favorable terms for our customers and the national economy. We are also behind curbing energy costs for households and businesses. We lead important international projects that turn Greece into a natural gas hub in Europe. We are behind a green future by investing in RES projects, green fuels and modern gas-fired power generation. We are behind Physicon, the only nationwide network of CNG stations spreading the environmental and economic benefits of natural gas mobility across the country. We are behind everything that drives energy forward. Depot Commercial Group.
What if the past and present could meet? What if, to save the landscape, we changed it? What if the future began by looking at our cities under a different light? What if we revolutionized the way we stop, not just the way we move? What if transforming the world started from our homes? Like Thomas Alva Edison, we never stop asking questions. The questions that push us to focus on renewable energy sources, decarbonisation, and energy services. To build together a more sustainable and better future for everyone. Edison, becoming the energy that changes everything.
Hi, we are the Wilfrid Martens Centre for European Studies, the official think tank of the European People's Party. A think tank, elitist, isolated, grey suit experts that hide in tall buildings? Well, not exactly. We are more like idea ninjas, positive thinkers. Positive, but not naive. Europe's challenges are very real, but we refuse to see them as symptoms of a failing system. And we do not hurry to offer simplistic, populist answers. We think these challenges deserve the best of our intellectual efforts. We share the same spirit as the European founding fathers. Europe, the biggest, most ambitious democratic project. Remember, through our work, the legacy of Wilfrid Martens, our founder, lives on. He was a visionary, yet pragmatic and responsible pro-European, and a freedom champion. Being a political think tank also means that we are a full part of the policy-making ecosystem. We are here to inspire Europe's policymakers. We bring ideas that help the European Union become a strong global player, a reliable ally, and a better democracy promoter. Our strengths: a wide and growing network of partners all over Europe, a track record of research excellence, and a dynamic presence in the EU bubble and online. So, what drives us forward? In the end, it all comes down to you. Yes? You. We aim to influence and impact policy for the benefit of the European citizen. So, go ahead, read our studies, take part in our events, participate in our campaigns, come discuss, share, and even challenge our ideas. The choice is yours, and so is the EU.
People are excited about what AI will do for them. We're excited about what AI will do for business. Meet the Watson X assistants. AI designed to multiply output by automating tasks. When you Watson X your business, you can use AI assistants to help coders code faster, customer service respond quicker, and employees handle repetitive tasks in less time. Let's create AI assistants that transform business with Watson X. IBM, let's create.
υπάρχουν πολλές δυνάμεις που κινούν τον κόσμο. Γι' αυτό και στην Ideal Holdings έχουμε δημιουργήσει με κριτήρια βιωσιμότητας ένα χαρτοφυλάκιο με διαφορετικές επιχειρήσεις, που όλες όμως έχουν ένα κοινό. Το δύναμη με τα πολυκαταστήματα Attica, τον απόλυτο shopping προορισμό με την Byte, μία από τις μεγαλύτερες εταιρείες πληροφορικής στην Ελλάδα. Με την Αστήρ Βιτόγιαννης, πολυεθνική δύναμη στην κατασκευή μεταλλικών κομμάτων, και την Adacom, με δυναμική παρουσία στον χώρο της κυβερνοασφάλειας και των ψηφιακών υπογραφών. Ideal Holdings, ελληνική εταιρεία συμμετοχών.
wealthiest, the most successful people are generally international.
The world is becoming an ever volatile, ever-changing place, changing much faster than it did before. There's a class of person out there now who's actually rapidly adapting to the changing environments.
The world is moving to global citizens.
Henley & Partners is a unique firm that is addressing the needs of this global citizen.
Like so many times in life, you don't get aware of the need until you really ended up in a situation, and then it's too late.
Where it's quite useful to have just options.
Ultimately, quality of life, education, mobility, security, and tax. In this international and global world that we're in, these are the tools you want.
Truly the ultimate symbol of freedom.
Yes, being free.
It's the ability to live where you want, travel where you want, raise your kids where you want, and not subject your family to the fate of where you happen to be born. You actually get to choose.
I find that Henley & Partners are a professional company, but they're also very approachable.
Very open communication. It's like you know somebody for 30 years.
Always starts with an initial meeting where we really establish whether we are the right people to deal with and whether the client is right for us.
Well, from the point of view of the clients, and I've heard this from so many of their clients, the word family just comes up over and over again. It doesn't feel so much like going and talking to a professional services firm. It feels like a family.
And what we found is when we turn to Henley & Partners is we get the answers right away, and it's straightforward, and the timelines are condensed dramatically, and that gives us very much a sense of comfort that we're in good hands and we're with people who know what they're doing. It's a fantastic kind of all-encompassing service that you get when you come to Henley & Partners.
They know what they're doing. They're professional, efficient, courteous.
They are providing a true service to these global high net worth individuals that are concerned about taxes, concerned about their freedom, concerned about the safety of their family.
And that's what Henley & Partners offers our clients, and that's what Henley & Partners helps
Κυρίες και
create
κύριοι,
and construct for
ο
governments.
επόμενος κύκλος συζήτησης ξεκινάει. Παρακαλούμε, περάστε στην αίθουσα εργασιών του συνεδρίου. Ladies and gentlemen, the next conference session is about to begin. Please proceed to the conference room.
Is really the firm that created this industry, pioneering many of these programs.
I'm not aware of any other company that has the knowledge of both sides of the equation so deeply, so intimately, that they can really claim to be experts on both sides.
That's what Henley & Partners does, and we do it very well.
Γιατί να πληρώνετε full τιμή για όλα τα μέλη της οικογένειας όταν προσθέτοντας ένα νέο μέλος στο δικό σας πρόγραμμα μειώνετε το κόστος? Φέρτε ένα ή περισσότερα μέλη της οικογένειάς σας και δείτε τις τιμές να πέφτουν. Nova Family προγράμματα. Πρόσθεσε νέα γραμμή με καλύτερη τιμή. Nova. Ψάχνεις για αξιόπιστη λύση ίντερνετ για το σπίτι σου? Καλώς ήρθες στο Nova 5G Home Internet. Σούπερ γρήγορο και σούπερ αξιόπιστο ίντερνετ με σούπερ απλή ενεργοποίηση. Απλά σύνδεσέ το στην πρίζα και ξεκίνα να μιλάς και να σερφάρεις όσο θες. Έλα τώρα και εσύ στο 5G Home Internet μόνο από 26 ευρώ το μήνα. Μόνο με την Nova.
Check this out.
It hasn't been such a long time since people first started shopping online, and it was easy to keep up with the clicks. Little by little by little by more, the clicks added up to be more than the stores, and e-tailers worked harder than ever before because they had to keep up with the clicks. The clicks came from laptops, then tablets and phones, Monday through Sunday, office and home, 24 hours in every zone, and still they kept up with the clicks. Now shoppers ask more from the websites they're on, their language, their currency, their way, or they're gone, so you'd better keep up with the clicks. All of a sudden, there are so many must-dos if you want to keep selling, like delivery there, no there, or there.
And make it tomorrow, first thing.
No time for borders. Gotta stay in control to stay in the flow and continue to grow. But we'll help you. Keep up with the clicks.
Check this out.
It hasn't been such a long time since people first started shopping.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you could take your seats, please. Could I ask you to take your seats? Well, welcome everybody to this gala dinner for our roundtable. We've had a very busy day of discussions about a few things that are happening in the world, and this evening we're going to have a conversation with Prime Minister Mitsotakis and former Prime Minister of Italy, Enrico Letta. So I would like to invite both of them, please, to join me here on the stage, and we're looking forward to this conversation. Thank you. Prime Minister Mitsotakis and Enrico Letta.
Putting me in the middle.
So I think neither of these two prime ministers need any introduction, but nevertheless, let me just say, first of all, Prime Minister Mitsotakis, you are the Prime Minister of a country that was the Economist Country of the Year.
Thank you very much.
Last year, so that has to be a good thing. And Enrico Letta, you've been traveling around Europe these past few months, writing a report called Molto più di un mercato, a lot more than a market, on the future of the European single market. And in fact, today, a book by that same title by Enrico Letta is published, appearing in bookstores in Italy. So congratulations on that, and we're going to be discussing the themes of that. But first of all, if I may turn to current political developments and the European elections we've just seen and the fallout, which has been quite dramatic from those elections. I think everybody here would be very interested to hear your assessment of where this leaves Europe in particular, and not least the situation in France and the distribution of the important European jobs that also happens as a following on from those elections. If I could start with you, Prime Minister Mitsotakis.
Well, first of all, it clearly pays off to systematically show up at your conferences, because then I hope that was not the primary reason for voting as Country of the Year, but thank you regardless for that great honor. Now, turning to the European elections, let me first of all point out that when you look at the mathematics of the European Parliament, it is very clear that the European political center, as it is represented by the three main political families, the European People Party, the European Socialists and the European Liberals, have a comfortable majority in the European Parliament, and it is actually the only working majority, which was also the reason why the discussions around the main jobs essentially centered around the three political groups. I think that the hard right or the far right probably did slightly worse than many people expected before the elections. However, they clearly made their presence felt in France and in Germany. And of course, this is a development that has obvious consequences for both these countries. The most dramatic ones are taking place in France as we speak, because the outcome actually triggered a parliamentary election. And it is indeed interesting to point out that these days there is concern about the fiscal position and the borrowing costs of France, whereas Greece, which was the poster child for the fiscal problems of the European Union, seems to be doing rather well and is a pillar of fiscal stability. So I think that it is very important to preserve that working majority and to ensure that the new Commission President gets to the 361 vote threshold in the European Parliament, and my expectation is that this will actually happen. And then for Europe to get down to work, to deliver on essentially the pillars of a new European policy that will look at issues around competitiveness. And I would like to congratulate Enrico on his truly excellent report. He put a lot of effort and energy into writing this text, and it was clearly for him not just a procedural obligation, and there are many interesting thoughts and ideas which I'm sure we'll have a chance to discuss coming out of this report. But how do we actually make the single market work in those sectors where we clearly have challenges? Are there new freedoms that we need to enshrine in our collective European logic? All these are important questions which also to a certain extent answer to the grievances that Europeans feel. And of course then we need to look at issues such as defense, migration. These are topics which will feature prominently in the next European cycle. But I think it is important to get the top jobs out of the way relatively quickly, because there was a lot of drama last time. And I think that the more predictability and speed we have in sorting out, the remaining, confirming Ursula von der Leyen and then, confirming the rest of the Commission, the better it will be for Europe.
Can I ask you, I want to come to you, Enrico, in a moment, but can I ask you for a brief reflection on the results here in Greece of the European elections and what conclusions you drew from that?
Look, the one conclusion is that new democracy remains the one dominant political force in Greece. The second or the third party, if you add up the percentages, they're under the percentage that we got. Clearly, we had set a target at the election result of the 2019 election. We did not get to 33%. And I think there are various reasons for that, which I take very, very seriously. It's not just, the fatigue with consecutive elections. I'm sure that played a part. We had very high levels of abstention, but I'm sure there were also citizens that decided to use the European elections to send us a message concerned with the cost of living. I think this was a very, very important priority that is very, high upon the agenda of most people in the country. But at the same time, the European elections did not change the fundamental political dynamics. We had a double national election in 2023. We managed to get to 41%. We managed to demonstrate that you can actually have a center-right party that has a very broad appeal and can bring together people who identify as right-wing, but also people who identify as progressive centrists. And I think this has been something which has proven rather elusive for many other European, traditional, large European parties. And of course, that victory was reflected in a strong parliamentary majority. We have a mandate for 4 years to deliver upon complicated reforms. If the first 4 years were about stabilizing the country, and I think we've succeeded in that, the next 4 years is really about catching up with Europe and about making sure that we don't just rest on our laurels, but that we really push an aggressive convergence agenda with Europe. We have 3 years remaining in our term. There will be no early elections. I'm adamant about that. Elections will take place in 2027. I was equally adamant during my first term. Many questioned my commitment to a stable electoral cycle. They were wrong. They will be wrong again. We will have an election in 2027, and we judge in our entirety on what we have delivered in our second term.
You've clearly been keen to listen to the message from voters. Does the message lead you to think that reforms should be speeded up, slowed down, as before? Is there any message there?
I'm a committed reformist, and even if reforms sometimes, ruffle feathers, that is the nature of the reform agenda. But we received a mandate for these reforms. For example, if we go after tax evasion, as we committed to do in our electoral manifesto, I'm sure some people may be disappointed with that, but at the end of the day, everybody recognizes that it is the right thing to do. So for me, the message is very clear: focus on deliverable results. We want you to address issues of cost of living. This actually relates to the functioning of the single market, at least in one dimension, and that is the prices that we pay for products produced by multinational companies. When we had our discussions with Enrico, it was an issue I pointed out. We cannot have the same identical products being sold at significantly different prices in a single market. This is not acceptable, but people want better healthcare. And at the end of the day, the focus needs to be on disposable income, on wage convergence. This is our main commitment, and this doesn't happen miraculously or by government decree. You need investment, you need growth, you need to bring down unemployment. All the figures are trending in the right direction. The economy is growing at a significantly faster pace than the rest of the Eurozone. The country is an attractive investment destination. We have created almost 400,000 new jobs over the past 5 years. And if we continue to deliver on these reforms, we will achieve the targets that we set by 2027 in terms of a significant improvement in disposable income. So I think the message was just get down to work and do what you told us you would do, because that was the reason we were voted back into office in the first place.
Enrico Letta, I want to come in a moment to your report, but first I'd be very, and I'm sure everybody here would be keen to know your reflections on the European elections in Italy, first of all, but also because you've lived a lot of your life in recent years in France, so you'll be a keen observer of French politics. So what do you take from this?
First of all, thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. I hope the micro will, yes. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here to exchange with Prime Minister Mitsotakis. I am very happy to be here also because my journey on the single market report started here last year in October. We met at your office, Kyriakos, and it was for me a very, very interesting and important beginning of the journey. Then I visited 65 cities in Europe, more than 400 meetings, ideas, testing ideas. It was really fantastic, but everything started here. On the elections, I can tell you that I'm not pessimistic for one very clear reason. I remember the European elections 5 years ago. And 5 years ago, the main terms at the center of the European electoral campaign were Brexit, Italexit, Frexit, Dexit, Nexit. That were the terms. The discussion 5 years ago was about who will be next after Brexit. And today, I think we are at the end of an electoral campaign where every party was involved in discussing how lead Europe, not how to exit from Europe.
This is the great service that my country did to Europe.
Yeah, it is exactly what I would like
inoculated you from Brexit.
To say and to thank the UK for this, because at the end of the day, Brexit was so negative for the UK and for Europe too, that today all the political parties, no matter left, right, center, they are all committed in how to be within the European Union and driving the European Union, leading the European Union in one way or another. And about France, I can tell you that I'm really very worried about the result, but I can tell you that I'm very worried about the trend. And the trend is a big difference between Paris or the big centers and the rest of the country. And that is not only France. Western democracies today are democracies where you find a big cleavage. The centers where things are happening and the peripheric areas where services of general interest are losing ground, where people are losing opportunities, and that are having a vote that is different from the centers. And that was part also of my journey on the single market, because we have to be very clear in saying, and I make a link, if I may say, the single market in the European Union was considered until now too much as freedom to move. So too much considered as opportunities for those who want to move, for those who want to leave their country or those speaking more languages. And in reality, the European Union is not only for those who want to move. The European Union is for all. This is why I wanted to say the single market is not only freedom to move, it's also freedom to stay. And freedom to stay means also giving a new set of services of general interest. Hospitals, healthcare, schools, education, infrastructures, not only in the centers where all the opportunities are, but in a more spread way, in the possibility to say that the future of our integration is not only with this cleavage. I can tell you that for me, discussing in a market in my country with an old man, I gave him a paper with the name Europa, and he told me it's not for me. I'm not among those who wants to take the plane. And this definition, Europe is for those taking the planes, was for me very, very much meaningful. And I started from here saying that, but Europe is not for those who want to take planes. Europe is for all, also for those who want to stay. This is why part of my report is also trying to give solution to this big cleavage. And I link it to France because I was in France when the Gilets jaunes, you remember the Gilets jaunes. The Gilets jaunes, the yellow vest, started there, and it was the periphery against Paris. And today, once again, Paris' result was totally different from the rest of the country. So I think there's an issue there, and this issue is not just France. I think UK was the same. London against Brexit, and the rest of the countryside in favor of Brexit. I think we have to consider that this is one of the main issues for our democracies.
I want to dive deeper into the report, but first just one more question on following on from the broader political fallout. Meloni and Le Pen, often comparisons drawn, but also distinctions. You have close-up view of both characters. How should we think of Le Pen in relation to Meloni?
I think Le Pen is different from Meloni, and the two are different. And I don't know what will be or what would be a Le Pen or Bardella government. By the way, Bardella has Italian origins, so it is a very strange situation there. But I don't know what will be the point. But I know that Europe needs to have all the 27 on board in the European Council. Kyriakos knows better than I do how the present European Council is working. But I have one point that is important to answer your question, Daniel, is the following one. We are discussing about the single market. The single market is the most important achievement of the European integration. The single market has an origin with one creator, Jacques Delors, the French pro-European leader in the 80s, in a strong and very strict alliance with another great leader in the European Union in the 80s. Jacques Delors was the most pro-European leader. To create the single market, he made an alliance, a successful alliance, with the most anti-European leader in Europe at that time. This alliance worked And this most anti-European leader was Margaret Thatcher at that time. It was the alliance between Delors and Thatcher that created the single market. And the single market was the most successful tool in the European history. I say that because I think that the integration of the single market and giving the European people tools to be more competitive, giving companies tools to be more competitive, to go abroad, to be more innovative, to have jobs creation, I can tell you is not for those who are pro-European or anti-European. It's for those who want to help European people and European business. And it is today what we have to do. So my point is that the next legislature, this legislature, has to have in mind that the launch of the single market, the integration of the single market, and the elimination of what we had in the last period. I can tell you just one figure that for me is very, you know, we spent, and it was correct and it was right to do so, a lot of money to help Ukraine. We spent a lot of money to help Ukraine. Military furnitures to help Ukraine. 80% of these military furnitures were to buy non-European military furniture, were to buy non-European military furnitures and to help jobs creation out of Europe. In the same period, the US helped Ukraine. They helped Ukraine with military furniture. The same figure, the same 80% for the US is 12%. That means that 88% of what they spent was to help jobs creation in the US. I say that because the difference between a single market well working and a single market not well working, not integrated, is jobs creation here in Europe. And the integration of single market is to help jobs creation, growth, competitiveness, innovation in Europe.
So I think if you mentioned Jacques Delors, and of course I should have mentioned at the outset you head the Jacques Delors Institute, so you, as it were, walk in his name. His great genius at that time was to go around all the European capitals when he came in as President of the Commission and to identify a project around which Thatcher and other people could all coalesce. So to Kyriakos Mitsotakis, I would ask, do you see the possibility in Europe today, with all the difficulties that Europe faces, the will and the potential to coalesce in a similar way around a project to really launch European momentum in a new way?
First of all, let me agree with what Enrico said regarding the comparison where we were in 2019 and the debate in 2024. And I would argue that these 5 years, in spite of the challenges, have helped us, Europeans, to move in the right direction, in the sense that through very difficult compromises, we took extremely important decisions. None more important, in my mind, than the creation of the Recovery and Resilience Fund, which was a momentous decision to take, because for the first time, we resorted to European borrowing to fund very, very specific initiatives post-COVID, but which, however, also fit with our broader strategic agenda, the green and digital transition, and issues of competitiveness and social cohesion. And I think sometimes we underestimate the importance of this decision. For Greece, this means 36 billion euros of grants and loans, but this money is not given away for free. There is very strict conditionality, a clear connection to the reforms we need to implement, and I think a tight methodology that gives comfort to those countries that were more skeptical about this decision that the money is indeed well spent. Why am I raising this issue? Because if you look at the goals that we have set as a European Union, the green transition, the digital transition, issues around competitiveness and social cohesion, what you mentioned, I think is extremely important. And this right to stay is indeed, a very powerful notion that goes against the idea that Europe is only for the metropolitan elites who can travel from one country to the other. Defense, and whether we can do something meaningful at the European level around defense. So when you look at our ambitions and our financial firepower, it seems to me that there is a misalignment. So the challenge is, how do we mobilize more public and private capital to achieve these important goals that we have set? And when you look at defense in particular, post Russian invasion to Ukraine, again, we all acknowledge that we want to do more with defense, but we recognize the limitations of our national budgets, which are very real. And Greece is a country which has systematically exceeded the 2% threshold of defense spending as a percentage of GDP, unlike other countries which for decades took advantage of the peace dividend and diverted this additional spending into other directions. We did not have the luxury to do that. But if we really want to be serious about defense, we also need to identify European projects with European technology that serve common European goals. And that is why I proposed with Prime Minister Tusk this idea of a common European defense shield, yes, which would be funded from joint European borrowing. And sometimes I hear the skeptics saying, okay, this is not exactly within the scope of the treaties, but at the same time, this is exactly what we're doing with Ukraine. We're using European money to buy arms for Ukraine. So when there's a will, there is a way. But we need to make sure that whatever we do in defense also supports the defense industry in Europe, because it is strange that we are sort of increasing our defense spending, but most of the spending does not necessarily go to Europe. It goes to the US. And the same, of course, is true when you look at our capital markets. If you look at the private capital side of the equation, you have all these huge pools of European savings that are actually directed into the US only to be possibly reinvested into Europe, but wearing a US hat. Does this make much sense? Probably no. That is why the whole discussion around capital markets union, which was also highlighted by Enrico in his report, is so meaningful and so important. So the idea of whether we will have, to put it very simply, a second RRF post-2026, and what would that mean? How would this tie into the structural funds and the common agricultural policy, which are pillars of the European budget? I mean, these are important topics that need to be discussed, and the next multi-annual financial framework is not that far into the future. And I think we'd better start these discussions now. But it seems to me that defense in particular is an area where we can mobilize a new momentum to create European solutions that will again address European security needs and will also develop European technology. We have the technology in Europe to do what I described. And it's also spread out amongst many European countries. And of course, because we will find ourselves at the NATO summit in 10 days, I would argue that this is fully complementary with NATO and can also be fully integrated into the NATO structures, because our American friends have been systematically asking us Europeans, spend more, do more for your collective security. So I don't see this as an initiative that would necessarily, it's not competing with NATO. I'm sure that the NATO generals would be very happy if we had more sort of integrated air defense systems protecting the European skies.
So at this point, it might be helpful, Enrico, if you could just give in a very potted form some of your main recommendations that emerged from the report. You know, when the 1992 project, as I remember it, was a very detailed set of policy, very technocratic way of creating the single market by Lord Cockfield, then Commissioner, a blueprint. And here we are 32 years later, and it's still not complete. So what is your blueprint? How will it work? In a nutshell, what should we focus on?
I start from one point that is, for me, the most important one. This legislature started with all our countries discussing about one topic. And the topic is it possible to implement and to apply the Green Deal as we decided without having a strong financial facility to accompany it in the way in which we can implement the Green Deal? And my answer to this question is no. We need to have a big change in that approach. And the only big change is with the creation of a strong facility to accompany the Green Deal. And I can tell you that going around Europe, it was for me very important to see that the protests, the worries were not just in one country or in another country. Farmers were protesting everywhere. What was the main argument of the protests? It was, you decided to go green, you, the European leaders. You decided to say that it will cost a lot, because we said 650 billion euros per year, and you didn't say anything on how to cover this cost. So I, as farmer, I think I will pay for it, and I don't want. And I can tell you that this discourse that I heard in Warsaw, and I heard in France, I heard in my country, I heard in the Netherlands, it is exactly the same discourse that I heard from trade union of automotive industry workers. They told me exactly the same. You decided to change in 35, but you didn't say how to accompany these changes. So if we are not able to tell clearly how to accompany in a financial way these changes, I think I will pay for it as worker, as SME, as a big company. This is why I think the main question, Kyriakos, for you, the 27, and for the Commission, and for Ursula von der Leyen and the European Parliament will be to be clearly able to answer this question, to say we are able to finance for the next years this big challenge of the green, digital and just transition. And how to do so? The only way is to combine private and public money. And to combine private and public money, we need what you said about the integration of financial markets, the figure of what you said, our savings leaving Europe and to go to the US. The European Central Bank underlined this figure is 300 billion euros per year of savings of European families, European companies going to the US, because the US market is more integrated, more attractive, more innovative. I can tell you that NASDAQ, just NASDAQ, is all the European stock exchanges together plus 50% in terms of dimension. It is clear that the attractiveness is there. And so we are not attractive. And the second big point is that we are not attractive because we are not innovative enough. The other big part of my journey was meeting young startuppers. I met them in Estonia, I met them in Portugal, I met them in Belgium and in my country. And they told me all the same thing. And the same thing was, my dream is to go to the US. I want my dream financed. I want to scale up. I need an environment that is good for the realization of my dream. And I can tell you that we need to create the right environment. This is why the second big message for me, you know, the single market is also known as the market of the 4 freedoms. The freedom of movement of goods, services, capitals, and persons. If you think a little bit to the 4, it looks like the economy of the 20th century. Goods, services, capitals, and persons. We miss something that is crucial today, the intangible in the economy. So the big need, and this is the flagship of maybe the flagship of my report, I propose to the European leaders to say now we have to raise the 5th freedom, freedom of movement of innovation, knowledge, research, skills, to try to give an answer to all these young start-uppers, to tell them you can stay here to become reality your dreams. And the only possibility, and this is one of the proposals I had presented to the leaders, we need in the next Commission a Vice President for the 5th freedom. Because the 5th freedom, innovation, knowledge, skills, research, has to be one of the most important driving forces for Europe in the next years. This is what we are missing. And maybe, Daniel, just a third point, and I stop here, otherwise you risk not to have dinner tonight. And the third point, and a third proposal is, you know, I was in the US presenting the report, and I was shocked because some US entrepreneurs and investors, they told me, but you know that for us to invest in Europe is a sort of hurdles, obstacles race, because you are a continent where 24 languages, 27 legal systems, 27 fiscal systems is a mess. Is a mess in terms of bureaucracy, in terms of overburdening. You need to simplify. And I told them, I give you an idea, and this is the idea that I presented to the leaders. Why don't we create a 28th virtual state? We are 27 with all our legal systems. And we are proud of all our legal systems. It's impossible to cancel the commercial right or the business law in my country, in Greece, in France. It's impossible. But we can create a 28th virtual system with, for instance, a business law for this 28th virtual system. And we can give you, entrepreneurs, investors, in Europe and out of Europe, the possibility to choose this 28th legal system. And with this 28th legal system, you avoid to change country by country. You have one passport tool, one master key, and with this master key, you can enter all the 27 legal systems. It is the way to simplify, to avoid all these bureaucratic burdens, is the way to create the possibility for investors out of Europe to come to Europe in a simplified system, and all of us, SMEs first, to be able to work without being obliged to have a legal system, a legal office with 50 people advising you on how to change legal system from Italy to France or from Spain to Portugal. I can tell you that the strength and the big success of the single market of Jacques Delors was that it was very pragmatic. I can tell you that last time I met Jacques Delors in September. Jacques Delors passed away last December. We discussed about his famous statement, because once he said, it's impossible to fall in love with a single market. I think I understand what he wanted to say, but I told him, you know, for my generation, for our generations, the single market was passion too, because it was the possibility to live freedoms. With the Berlin Wall fall, it was the freedom of opportunities. And the single market is full of passions, full of freedoms. I can tell you it's more than that. Daniel, if I have to summarize in a nutshell my personal experience on the single market, I can tell you this personal experience. I used to live twice out of my country in my life. Once before Jacques Delors and the single market, and the second time after Jacques Delors and the single market. I was in the 70s, a young kid with my parents. My father was working in Alsace, in Strasbourg, at the University of Strasbourg. And he brought his family with him. And we lived in France in the 70s, before the single market. Then I used to live in France in the last years, working there and bringing my family there after the single market establishment in Paris. I can tell you that the difference in my life was the first experience in France. We were a family of Italian migrants in France, a family of Italian immigrants in Alsace. The second experience, we were a family of European citizens deciding to live in Paris. I can tell you it makes the difference between being a family of Italian immigrants living in Alsace and being a family of European citizens choosing to live in France. I can tell you that the single market, Europe, is not only figures, is not only economic rules, is life of the people, is citizenship, is being together in the same country that is Europe.
Well, I can tell you that resonates with me as a citizen of a country which no longer has these rights, but that's another matter. Listen, we have a few minutes left, and I want to use that time, if I may, to ask you both about two other elections that are coming up. The first one, or the biggest one perhaps, is the US election. There's been, as you are all aware, a lot of drama in recent days in American politics. I'm sure that drama is going to continue right through to November, and who knows, possibly afterwards. So the question is, what future for, or how to think about EU-European relations at a time of political turbulence in America? You've both mentioned the US quite a lot, both in terms of its economic dynamism and the comparison with the European market. Kyriakos Mitsotakis, what do you think Europe, or how should Europe position itself, and how should Greece position itself vis-à-vis an America that is going through possibly one of the most important elections in its history?
Well, first of all, no matter how hard you will push me, I will make no comments about the US elections for reasons which I'm sure you fully understand. And I've worked with both President Trump and President Biden, but I do need to point out that when it comes to big decisions taken by the US, by the current administration, some of these decisions were taken clearly through an America First lens. So when the IRA, which is essentially a piece of protectionist legislation, was passed, it was not exactly that we were extensively consulted. And what we are currently seeing, not simply because of the IRA, but also for other reasons that Enrico mentioned, is when you ask the big European companies, not the American companies, whether they choose to invest in Europe, or in the US, they're voting with their feet. And this in itself is an indication that we actually have a serious problem. So I don't expect this to drastically, this approach to drastically change. The question is, how quickly can we adapt to this new reality, especially when it comes, for example, to the green transition? It is indeed, striking that we have set the most ambitious targets in terms of the reduction of CO2, but when you look at the technology behind achieving these targets, it doesn't seem to me to be European technology, and that we've lost actually our competitive edge in sectors such as renewables, or even electric, or even cars. The automotive sector in Europe is currently struggling to adapt to this new reality. So
that's primarily Chinese competition rather than US competition.
It is Chinese competition, heavily subsidized Chinese competition, but at the same time, we also have American companies which leapfrog European companies without state subsidies. So we have to be honest when we look at the mirror in terms of what exactly is happening. On the one hand, you have a protectionist system of state-sponsored capitalism. On the other hand, you have a very dynamic free economy, which is also choosing to use additional stimuli of public money because it can afford to run a huge deficit, because it is the country that can actually afford to do that, and because the markets will continue to finance it, and we seem to be stuck in the middle. So this, for me, is the big strategic challenge that we need to face over the next electoral cycle. And of course, returning to the question of defense, there it is very, very clear that we need to do more to protect our own continent. And I think I've elaborated
but within the NATO context.
But always, but again, in terms of also developing our industries. And one final point, because I think what you said about farmers is so important, and it also brings us back to your first point: centers versus rural. At the end of the day, at the time when food security is critical, so you have the agricultural sector, around 10% of emissions in total, if I'm not mistaken, but critical in terms of the right to stay where you live, because farming by nature does not take place in the big cities. And at the same time, we impose a speed of adjustment to our farmers without giving them the tools to actually adapt also to foreign competition from countries which are not faced with the same regulation. It doesn't really make much sense. There are other areas where we could move much faster in terms of reducing our emissions. But again, there I would be looking for sort of homegrown European technology to be developed. Let me give you another example: nuclear energy. Europe was and still is a leader in nuclear technology. There's no way we can do. There is no way, and Greece is not a country that has nuclear energy. There is no way that we will reach carbon neutrality without nuclear. Are we investing as Europeans in the next sort of generation of small nuclear reactors? Have we really placed our chips where we should in this green transition, at least identifying, 3-4 critical industries? Are we investing in our interconnections to the extent that we should? When it's blowing in the North Sea, it may be sunny in Greece, but there is no way you can make renewables work unless you have a very sophisticated interconnection grid. So I think we at least need to get our priorities right and try to be real champions where we can be, and maybe acknowledge the fact that maybe we will never be as competitive as China when it comes to the production of commodities such as such as photovoltaic panels.
Enrico Letta, a word from you on US-European relations in the light of your report.
I decided to end the report in the last page. There's the proposal of opening the discussion about a transatlantic single market. And I think it's time to have this discussion. I know that you can be a little bit skeptical on the feasibility of that. But if you think the rationale today brings there to say we need to have a more integrated transatlantic single market, the way in which we are, I would say, fighting with different systems without understanding each other, I think it's not the right way to stay in the world of today. What is this? A word of today is a word full of challenges for all of us. So I think, and I pledge for, I strongly, I would say, claim for the need for a transatlantic discussion on a transatlantic single market. I can tell you that this point is essential. I don't know who will be the leader of the US in the next 4 years. I can tell you that I was suffering last night. I was suffering. I can tell you because I'm always supporting the Democrats in the US, and I was suffering last night. I can tell you that we need, in any way, we need to keep the relationships between the US and the European Union in a very strong way. It is not time for fighting. It is time to be together, and this is my only big point. But can I maybe end up with one point that is for me very important? I would like to pay tribute to this great country. 15 years ago, Greece was the problem of Europe. Today, Greece is at the table where the solutions for Europe are decided. I can tell you this is because of you, because of your great country, and I have to tell you that seeing Prime Minister of Greece at the table with the biggest prime ministers of Europe deciding and taking solutions for the future of Europe 15 years later, for me, is a demonstration that hope for a better future is still there. Thank you.
Thank you. And one more. One final question for you, and this relates to the other election that I mentioned earlier. This will happen in 2 days' time in Britain. And I wanted to ask you, well, not so very long ago, you were on a visit to London and you happened to mention, I think as is usual, the Parthenon marbles, and Rishi Sunak, Prime Minister, cancelled a meeting with you, which made a lot of headlines in Britain. So if, as looks likely, we have a new government under Sir Keir Starmer in Britain, what do you think the prospects are for the return of the Parthenon marbles to Greece?
Well, things can only get better, can't they? But first of all, before touching upon the issue of the Parthenon sculptures, let me say that a lot of us felt very sad and distressed when the UK took the decision to leave the European Union, in spite of the fact that the relationship was not always very smooth. And I actually, my first council meeting, European Council meeting, was the last meeting that the UK Prime Minister participated. That's when Boris told us, see you later, and then we all know what happened, what happened since. Of course, also a lesson into the false promises of populists, and the fact that now, if you look at the polls, if the referendum would take place now, were to take place now, it would have been a different result. Now, I don't expect the UK to rejoin the European Union anytime soon, but I do expect the next Prime Minister, if the polls are correct, to re-engage more actively with Europe, and to come come to some sort of arrangement that will sort of at least partially reintegrate the United Kingdom into the European market, with the price that this, of course, entails. But I do think that the benefits for both sides will be more significant. So I would certainly like to reach out to the new UK Prime Minister if that's how things will work out, and to build a more constructive relationship. And then, of course, this could also have positive sort of consequences for what has been sort of I think a Greek mission for many, many years. What is important is to first ensure that the British government will not stand in the way of a possible arrangement that can be found between the Greek government and the British Museum, and if it can encourage it, so much the better.
Very good. Well, with that, I think we've probably said enough here, and you should all have your dinner. But I'd like to thank very much both Enrico Letta and Kyriakos Mitsotakis for a very fascinating conversation. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.